Thank you, Niels. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today and share my learnings. My name is Martin. I have been at LinkedIn for the last 2 years. I head up three of our teams. One is mobile growth, which is the majority of the company's growth, focused primarily on managing the largest Android smartphone manufacturers like Samsung, Xiaomi, Sony, getting our app on 500 million smartphones a year. The other program I manage is Apple and Google for anything business development related, early access programs, but also anything App Store related. And then the third pillar under Apple and Google would be any type of fire. So whenever something goes wrong with our app, then we have 5 apps on their app stores. I'm the link between engineering, product, and Apple and Google. And there's always a fire, at least once a week. Slowly turning gray. That's okay. And third hat that I wear at LinkedIn is product partnerships. For example, integrating Zoom into our LinkedIn Messenger product. So we're just looking to work with all of our product teams and co-draft a strategy for consumer growth by integrating with other third-party companies. Before LinkedIn, I was at Google for almost a decade. I was heading up their global distribution strategy for mobile apps. So Google had built 100 different apps and identified 10 of those apps to be worthy of a distribution strategy by working very closely with Android manufacturers and advertising. And you're right, before that, I was at Heineken in Central Africa, Rwanda, for just over half a year working on a distribution project. Very passionate about technology because it scales really well. And I'm super eager to hear your questions. Again, want to make the most and best use out of our time today. And I promise you, I know we're being recorded and I obviously cannot share specific to LinkedIn confidential details, but I will share and be as transparent as I can be to make sure it's tangible. And hopefully that will be of value to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So happy to learn from your side. Would you like to start, perhaps give a brief introduction on your view and your experience on this topic, Martijn?
Absolutely. And great to meet you all. I like Serge's question, like, what does innovation mean to me? It means failing fast to basically understand your hypothesis and validate them or unvalidate them so that you can focus on scaling out what does work, but also continue to monitor those scale out items or features in the app to make sure that they continue to be valuable. One example is there, for example, what we, so first of all, LinkedIn and the majority of tech companies out of San Francisco and Silicon Valley are obviously based here, which means that the majority of product, so we have one product manager for every 10 engineers. So product is really the organization or department at most tech companies that do all the decision making and decide the roadmap and what to skill and what not to skill. So they work very closely with business operations and data science to ensure that we have data insights to make actionable action items. And key learning and key takeaway for that is that it's really important that innovation can come from any part of the world. To give you an example, traditionally, Japanese consumers work for the same company their entire life. So my Sony partner has been there for 30 years and he doesn't need a LinkedIn profile because he's not going to look for another job. So what we've done there, based on the feedback from our Japanese teams, is launch a feature called Close Colleagues, so that you can also use LinkedIn to build your internal organization chart, as you will, by connecting to your colleagues at, for example, Sony. You can say, well, Martin reports to Alex reports to this person. The benefit of this for our members in Japan is that whenever some of their colleagues post an interesting article or on their internal LinkedIn group, it shows up in the feed prioritized for them. So it's most relevant for them. So if they don't want to use it as a platform for finding a job or building skills to go and make a transfer in another career, they could use it to effectively boost their careers within their own Japanese companies like Sony. Now, this is good that innovation can come from everywhere. So we do have the framework in place where if someone has a bad or a good idea, we will listen to it. And eventually it will trickle down to product. And then product effectively works with BizOps and data science to calculate the forecasted impact. And impact to LinkedIn would be engagement in our mobile app. So this is through DAUs, daily active users, weekly active users, what we call sessions, scrolling through our feed and seeing how many minutes or things people click, making sure it's also relevant. So it needs to be accurate. And that's based on mostly qualitative feedback by really understanding what our members are feeling when they go through the feed, if it's relevant to them. And if not, we change to machine learning. And once we have that forecasted impact, we would then compare it to other initiatives, whether it's also internal product based or if it's through partnerships, the work that I do with product partnerships organization. And that has worked really well for us. So most of these new innovative ideas, we try to have them live for at least 6 to 9 months, because we also offer a premium subscription, which typically it's 1 month for free, but then people tend to convert a few months after. So we want to have at least 6 to 9 months live to understand what the real impact is, and also how it monetizes across our different business units, which is premium, LinkedIn Learning, talent solutions, and advertising. And Close Colleagues didn't work. There was just no product market fit. Turned out our Japanese members didn't really care about it. So we also deprecated the feature quite quickly. And that's okay. And then we just move on to something else and figure out how that works. The other key learning I'd love to share with you is that failure is not sort of looked down upon at LinkedIn. This is because, one, I think, we're an American company, and we really do appreciate intra and entrepreneurial spirit, because that's how we continue to grow and learn, and life and work is one big learning journey for everyone. So we hand out awards like these to people that do come to our employees. I don't know if you can see that. It's just like a plastic award, but really great to not only see the financial incentive if you do something that's valued by your company, but also you get a shout out, which is really important for some people in their team, and you get an award maybe sent to you at your home or your desk. And then there's the opportunity for those that would like to come and work closer to where the decisions are made, which is here in Silicon Valley. That if they have these ideas, some of them have the aspiration to work in a product-focused role in Silicon Valley, so that they're even closer to decision makers. So we do two things. One, we offer them the internal mobility to come here full time, but we also offer effectively like a quarterly program where they can come here as long as they find someone to do their job back in their home country, to then explore the role before they want to sign up for it, and to make sure there's a fit. So I think from an innovation perspective, we also look at, first and foremost, how is this valuable to our member? And is this creating an equal choice for anyone in the global workforce? Or are we alienating members that might not have a great network or opportunities, not have a great college background, like I'm sure most of us do? Because that's really where the world is going to, and where LinkedIn wants to focus on. We want to close what we call the networking gap. So, historically, you go to college, there you build a great network. Companies practically come towards your college to go and recruit talent. And that's why you typically end up getting a good job, a good pay, and a high quality of life. However, we're moving towards what we call a skills-based recruitment system, where we try to highlight the skills that are important for recruiters to get the job, regardless of background, regardless of college, regardless of your network, because that is effectively what matters and what will decide if someone is going to be successful in their role. And that in itself is quite innovative in this space. And we see a lot of growth from that. So, we have what we call knowledge workers, which is effectively all of us on this call. And then we have what we call first line workers, which could be retail workers, for example, Apple retail in the Apple store or in a Tesla store, but even in a Starbucks or Walmart or Target. And we want to make sure that our platform is also valuable for them. So to bring everyone's mind shift from, okay, we're hyper-focused on professionals to, okay, how to become more valuable for the rest of the global working population is a piece of innovation that's really important for us. And the way that we look at it is your classic funnel. We have these 5 big hypotheses, and then we say, okay, how do we validate or unvalidate them as quick as possible? And under these hypotheses, we have, okay, these are like the 10 business ideas we have bucketed in. This is a product feature we need engineering to do, or this is a partnership feature, and then it goes to my team. And then we just within 6 to 9 months, we try to validate or unvalidate those business ideas to see what works and what doesn't work. So the framework we have, it's a Google document. So it's a shared Google document where everyone working, in this case, for example, let's take the first line team. The teams that start on this is effectively business development, our team together with product. So we're the first one taking a step at the innovative funnel and the framework, meaning, okay, what are our hypotheses to grow and make sure that our offering is valuable to members. This is based obviously on data we get from BizOps and data science and our own market research. And then we loop in the product market teams, the marketing teams, the communications teams, and we will get their feedback. And then the framework itself is really a collaboration of, let's say, like 100 people. So that's not a very effective meeting to have. So what we start in terms of framework is have each people manager collect the feedback from their teams. And then that all goes back to business development and product, who'll meet about it. And if there's a very clear outcome and everyone agrees that these are the top 5 things we should prioritize, we go for that. If not, we set up one meeting with literally 100 people and we just go around real quick. Support, unsupportive, pass. So if you don't have anything to say, you can just say pass. And it works really well because you get to a decision at the end of that meeting, which is still mostly a decision made by product and business development, but at least you take care of 2 things. One, everyone does feel involved. It feels like their voice is heard. And you can also then back it up with data to say, well, based on everyone's feedback, this is what we've decided to do. So everyone can get behind it and feel better about the project.
Yes, I have one question, because you have been discussing you mentioned the funnel. It's like the innovation funnel. So I guess you have like one funnel for the organization, something like that, or multiple funnels. So it's like a centralized approach. This is one question. Another one, how do you encourage people, or are you encouraging all the people in the organization to keep submitting ideas? Because eventually these are the ones that are being fed into the funnel, and then you have your mechanism to prioritize and vote on which one to be further developed. So
yeah, those are both great questions. So the first one about the funnel, if it's centralized or decentralized, it's a bit of a mix because we have our true north goals and the entire company, and we repeat it. I think repetition is very important. Everyone has their own agenda. So in order for everyone to understand what the company is working towards, we have our mission, we have our vision, and we understand like these are the key goals that we're trying to move, which is DAOs, weekly active users, sessions, and obviously that will translate into some form of revenue. But we also put that filter on it. Okay, is this inclusive to every member of the workforce? Is this valuable to everybody? Or are we just building something we think is valuable but not actually be valued? And starting there, we have that funnel effectively, but then we have 500 different features within our flagship app. So all of those product teams also have their own, actually the framework we use is called vision to values. So that's the answer. We have a centralized funnel, but then we have these for each feature, for each product team, as you will, they have their own vision to values framework. And when I work with the first line team, they didn't have one yet, so I built it for them. And the vision is, okay, we want to make sure that we provide economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So you start super high level, and then effectively you go, okay, but how does that mean? How can we grow? First of all, how can we grow the value of the platform to first line workers? And then how can we grow acquiring first line workers into our platform by teaming up with all these different potential partnerships that we're now working through? And it's a complex process, but all of those ideas effectively go back up to each chief of staff with the help of business operations. So business operations, we refer to as our Switzerland, sort of like the neutral that has the overview of everything at the company that happens. And they're also best equipped to make the most accurate database decisions to decide, okay, what are we going to resource for? What are we prioritizing? Where do we create headcount? It's a hybrid. It's a combination, meaning we would not exist if we don't focus on revenue and profitability. I mean, we are part of Microsoft, and that's also Microsoft cares about a lot, and that's what we're being measured against ultimately quarter over quarter. However, this values to vision or vision to values net framework we have, the values we have is also, we don't want to become another big social platform where anything can happen. And we are hyper focused on the culture of LinkedIn and of our members to foster a space where people feel valued. And there's effectively, we're mimicking the office environment. No one's going to come in and just use bad language, for example, because it's a professional environment. And then with that cultural value plus the key strategic goal of, okay, how do we make this as most inclusive to everyone, that we don't alienate everyone, and how does that build into our premium offering versus every member of our network? How do we miss out on certain underrepresented categories, whether it's youth in emerging markets, or maybe certain frontline workers, first-line workers that don't have access to a network or can't be part of a union? How can LinkedIn provide that for them? So it's not just revenue. And to further answer your question, the decision making therefore is centralized. And effectively what happens is that Sarah, our chief of staff, to our senior vice president of product. So we have business development reporting into product reporting into our CEO. So our senior vice president of product owner, he is effectively the decision maker at the company, but he would, for some very important strategic decisions, also consult with our CEO, Ryan. And product makes the decision, but based on everyone's feedback. And we all influence business development and all these other different product teams within the organization. We, together with BizOps and data science, built the business case. We're using that vision to values framework, including the impact for DAOs, WOWs, sessions, but then also the more qualitative piece of, we think that this helps with the other overlaying goals that we have in terms of equality and first line, etc. So it's I think the model works extremely well for a few reasons. One of them being repetition is key. So every company, all hands, every strategic document or framework would have these goals on the top. So it's impossible to forget them and not focus on them. And that's what effectively everyone is working towards. And it's been very effective, because previously at Google, it was also because of the size of the company. There's now 250,000 compared to 20,000 at LinkedIn. At Google, it was more business development, decision making, meaning business development said, hey, we did their market research. We want resources to do this project, kick it over to the technical, to product and engineering. And that often would fail, because if they were not involved in the project, they don't know why they would do it. And business development also often failed to really understand what's important to the company from an overlaying perspective, to make sure that everybody would feel incentivized to go do it. So I think having those true north goals, both from a revenue perspective, but instead of calling it revenue, just call it engagement metrics, and then define those as whatever it is for your company. And then have the cultural values built into that strategy is super effective at LinkedIn, and why we've continued to see growth, and why we've continued to make sure that the quality of our network, as you will, is still really high. That's probably quite a short answer, because I think it's built into our hiring. So the way that we hire across business development, product, we love failed entrepreneurs, because that's typically how you get good ideas and bad ones. But that's part of life, right? So we celebrate failure in that perspective, as long as you can verbalize the learning. So every Thursday morning now, I join what we call member value meetings, MVM, which is effectively our senior vice president of product owner and his leadership team of about 60 people, which I'm part of. And it's a 2-hour meeting every week, and we go through all of these top metrics. And so whenever I do my updates related to Apple, Google, or any of the product partnerships or mobile growth program, like if I just come in and say, oh, we grew 100% year over year, and we've closed another deal, that would not be a good day for me, because he only cares about what's the key learning, what do you have to share that's important for everyone else, and he doesn't want to hear just the positive. He prefers to hear what we call the keeping it real. Okay, we launched Close Colleagues, didn't work. This is what we've done. This is the result, and this is what we've learned. We should not focus on this for these reasons, and we're going to pivot towards somewhere else. I think that's really important, because even though, how do you foster a culture of innovation by incentivizing people, not penalizing them if an idea doesn't work out? I think it's because our leadership is so verbal about, hey, we want to hear your learnings. it's good if you fail fast. Just share those learnings with us so we can move forward and we can actually focus on what does work. You need 1,000 ideas to get the 10 good ones that effectively work. So I think it's culture that comes from the top. American companies, like most other cultures and companies in the world, they still have this top-down hierarchy in terms of culture and decision making in most cases. So it's really important that your leaders show their gratitude towards people that have that vulnerability, because it actually comes about vulnerability, right? Being vulnerable as a leader is incredibly important, because that's what makes your authentic connection to everyone in your company. And that vulnerability translates to everyone else saying, okay, I can be vulnerable too. So that's really a cultural thing that starts from the top at LinkedIn. Has become very effective and much celebrated as well within the company. The other way we incentivize innovation is we actually ask each of our employees and my team members. I go to them and say, how would you like to be recognized? They go, what do you mean? Well, there's salary bump, there's restricted stock units, there's an award, there's a public shout out, there's an email, like who would you like to be recognized by, and who in the company? Because it's such a personal question, and surprisingly a lot of people don't only care about money. So that's really important to understand on a person by person basis. So typically the runway we have is about 6 to 9 months, which we find quick enough based on the quality of our data science and BizOps teams that can get to relatively good modeling and accurate forecasting based on such a short runway. It's obviously easy because it scales quite well. So for example, across Apple and Android, we launched a feature in the app at 1%. A day later, we launched it at 2%. That doesn't mean that every 750 of our profiles get access to it. It's only those that have auto updates on their smartphones. And then only if there's no bugs, about a week or two later, we will go to 100%. And then we need at least 3 months to understand what it does to the ecosystem and how it impacts our business units and all that. So it does take a bit of time. And that's okay. That's also why we have so many fires, and we do realize that's not great because it drives a lot of negative app store ratings, which drives down our organic user growth, member growth. However, it's part of how we grow. It's part of how we innovate. Net, it's much better for us to continue to make mistakes and accidentally have these bugs and these fires where the app doesn't work sometimes. As long as it doesn't negatively impact our members in a way that hurts their career, it's worth it. So the decision maker who effectively decides, hey, this is not a good idea, we need to kill it, that would be the product manager, but with the feedback from everyone and the support from everyone. And typically that goes up to the group product manager, and the group product manager will discuss it directly with Tomer. And because Tomer is also a great leader, and Ryan Roslansky, our CEO, is a great leader, and to show that vulnerability, we can just all have these conversations. It's no longer awkward. If every week there's 10 people say, hey, I made a mistake, I failed, we thought this was right, but this is wrong. It's no longer awkward. It's just like, okay, great, it's just another week, and this is good. These are good learnings. So it's also something that we've built over time. In my experience, like working at Google for a decade, seeing the company grow from 25,000 to 200,000 was an amazing experience. But I'll tell you this, I think the level of vulnerability at LinkedIn and that culture of like, hey, we need your opinion because you're in the front line and you understand, you're talking to clients, you're talking to our members. We have a voice of member team, which is the team that just looks at qualitative feedback from our members, whether it's on LinkedIn itself, on posts or on other blogs, or on the app stores where people can leave negative or productive feedback. So having that voice of member team is critical to our company's success. Many companies don't have that. They only look at the data from their internal systems, but they don't actually listen to their members or customers. Not saying that's the case for Google. Google has been pretty good at that too, but it's such a big cultural change. And I think from a company structure perspective, to have product be the decision making, to have that overview is way more effective than having business development make the investment decisions and then kick it over to the fence, to product and engineering, where oftentimes it just doesn't work because they're not naturally incentivized. They don't understand how it moves any of the top level goals. What else can I say about innovation? I think Google is such a big company that also really depends on the team. Like if you work, for example, in the, so it's called X. It used to be called Google X. X is what Google refers to as their Moonlight Factory, where they're not working on incremental projects to make the world a slightly better place and obviously monetize it. They are really looking at, okay, what are the biggest problems in the world and how can we fix them? How can we, moonlight shots and goals, as you will. And they're very innovative. They're hyper focused. They have folks like you, like innovation specialists on the team to track and ensure that the innovation is managed in a process with a framework that makes sense for the company. They're not focused on short-term profitability as most other business units or projects would be at big tech companies. So they're doing a pretty good job. And if you're a big tech company, eventually also you realize it's more cost effective for you to just have a really great corp development team and just acquire. It's acqui-hires. You get good talent by acquiring smaller companies just for the talent. And then also for the product, if you can integrate it somehow into your product or keep it supplemental. And that's why you see corporate development teams growing at tech companies in order to ensure that they continue to be innovative, because they have a really effective corporate development strategy. And that's why these valuations are also extremely high, because we're all competing with each other. So at LinkedIn, we have voice of member team. We have what we call keeping it real. So even during the MVM, or the executive meetings every Thursday morning now, we have a section that it basically explains this is what our members said. So we have, this is great, feature launch. Someone's super positive about, for example, live stories, which is on top of the feed where you can do a live video presentation. But then some people hated it because it was too short or there was a bug. And then we also just highlight that. So for you specifically with an intermediary, the physician, I would focus on what are the best practices for a physician to optimize what we call, I guess, the end customer experience. So that's also something we do at LinkedIn. What does the ideal experience look like for a LinkedIn member? And then we have it categorized in software engineer, sales professional, and different geos. We have at least one developed market like the UK or France or the US, and then we have an emerging market. And we run through the entire cycle of, okay, what are all of the value propositions that LinkedIn has as a platform? And let's walk through the typical member experience. And let's walk so this is basically what happens today. And this is what the optimal experience would be for a member, leveraging all of the features and the power of LinkedIn, which is A to Z. If you think about someone creating a profile, creating a resume, building the skills using LinkedIn Learning, finding the job, getting interview preparation, consulting on the platform, having the interview on the platform, because we're now integrated with Zoom and all the other video live. I don't have the example on top of my head, but I know they are. So what sometimes happens is that, especially Silicon Valley, it's actually a very small industry, and especially the product decision makers, they all know each other and even go to each other to ask for advice in terms of innovation or any sort of project across these bigger companies. At networking events or informally just reaching out. And what sometimes happens is that one of these leaders or any member would post publicly on LinkedIn, like, hey, LinkedIn, and looping in Tomer and Ryan, our executives, this feature is not good because of these reasons. And then what our default response is to immediately loop in the product managers who are the decision makers about that specific feature or product, so that they get that feedback directly from the voice of member. They typically respond within a few hours to say, thank you, appreciate the feedback, let's look into it, and we will get back to you. And we actually do get back to them. So that's an example of like a publicly posted feedback of like, hey, we need this feature, or this feature is not good for these reasons. And that influences our engineering roadmap to build out a better feature. Great question. So we have, so the app that you all would have on your phone is what we call our Voyager flagship app. That is effectively the same, except for in China, because in China we have we have a different app with slightly different features. That's also because of reasons I can't mention, but you can imagine. There's the great Chinese wall there, the firewall. However, we do test certain features in countries before rolling it out to the rest of the world. And typically we would do that at least in a country big enough like Brazil or the US, where we have enough engagement to make quicker decision making. Brazil is really interesting because, and the Netherlands actually, Brazil and the Netherlands are very similar in the sense that the internet adoption is really high. People love going online and using platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter, etc., to get value from. But then from an innovation perspective, India is the biggest internet market effectively and still growing, and that's where the majority of future monetization opportunity is for the majority of tech companies, which is why so many people team up with Jio, which is a big company in India that does pretty much everything from telco to banking to selling smartphones, etc., as a way to get into the Indian market. So we had Saurabh, our product manager in India, built out our what we call LinkedIn Lite experience or app, which is a much lighter version of the flagship app that you and I would use, because our app would not work on a entry-level smartphone of $30 to $50. It's just too heavyweight. It takes up too much space, so people keep on installing it. It would crash. It basically uses a lot of data, which is expensive in India. So this is innovation from India. They built the business case, presented it to our decision-making or group product manager in Sunnyvale office to say, this is what we need, and I would like to build out the team. And they've done so very successfully 4 years ago. So we do think about the term that I think a lot of companies in Silicon Valley like to use is local globalization, really being hyper-focused on offering local experiences or localized experience, but still within the same environment. I think we don't, so we have LinkedIn Lite for that, and we have our Chinese version of the app, but from an equality perspective, we also just want one app that could work for everyone with many different features that we just localized in their language to make sure it's usable for them. And then from a cultural perspective, if the value proposition is not clear yet, and we feel like there is a good organic fit, we would try to team up with cultural leaders, companies. Obviously, we have Microsoft that's super valued in Japan, so we work with them as well as a distribution channel. I'll pause right there. Giel, let me know if that made any sense. If you have any questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So one question I have is, and perhaps you answered it from another angle. Sometimes at Roche, we encounter that there are good ideas in some fields geographically, somewhere in the world, whether it's in Canada or in Taiwan or Colombia, wherever. And we talk for a long time about how good would it be if this becomes big, whatever. And it sometimes seems that something is holding back. It doesn't grow large. And we feel sometimes that the element of ownership of the the ideator, the inventor, plays a role in this. What is your view on this, Martijn? What is the importance? How do you tackle this? That people say in the end, well, it was a good idea, but in the end, it was taken out of my hand to some business development or whatever department. How do you foster that?
The way that we try to avoid effectively exploiting people's innovations or ideas and then not have them be part of the project or continue to be in a position where they feel like, hey, this is my baby and I can drive value to the project. Why do you take it from me? Is what we call a pod system. So we have a pod leader. This could be anyone, anywhere in the world. And then under the pod leader, you have these pod members that are also part of that project team, as you will, to, again, for like 6 to 9 months, try to validate or unvalidate this hypothesis if it works. So that has been a very effective model to ensure that those who come with the idea and are also, if it's someone without any project management experience and it was just an idea, then we would try to support them, coach them, team up with an executive coach or an internal leader to basically get them the skills needed in order to be an effective project manager for that specifically. If that person aspires to do that, there's also a lot of people, surprisingly, that have a really good idea and just don't want to do it. They like their job, they like to do what they do, and they don't see themselves as sort of like an innovation leader to set up something completely new, which is okay because we have a very effective product team that is happy to take on that idea. But there always is an honest, transparent discussion to understand what the possibilities are. And that has worked quite effective for LinkedIn. I think typically what we do is we do give like a shout out in emails and big launches and company all hands that this idea came from someone in this office. This is the name, photo, project, to make sure that they feel valued for the great work and idea that they've brought to the table. And if somebody wants to stay involved, even if it's from the sidelines, just get an update. So we use way too many productivity tools, which is quite confusing. But if you want to be added to the Slack channel, you just keep on lurking there and continue to add your ideas if you'd like. There are obviously email alias and groups that are working. There's shared Google Docs, shared live Microsoft Word docs, intra websites, everything else. So we do try to foster a very transparent working environment where you can get access to anything you want. Some documents might be ACP to avoid them from like leaking out, and legal will be looped in, but you can be as involved as you want if it's your idea. But the project lead would be someone that has agreed on actively project managing. Typically how it starts out, it'd be 20% of your time for 1 quarter. So even for the pod lead, then for all the pod members. And the reason that it's good to have pod members is because if you're rolling out a new innovation across all these different geos, similar to your company, it's good to get these local insights to make sure that it works in those regions as well. That's why you want to have pod members in all these different regions. And then after the first quarter, if you're validated at least a part of that hypothesis, then you could scale it up to, let's say, 50%. And it also gives the recruitment or the hiring team some time to like find you backfill, so that you're not fully stretched doing 100% of your old job and then 100% of your new job, but there's effectively a good phase out period. And that obviously doesn't always work, but it is, I think it's still a good system and a good framework to work with. I would say about half of the ideas are actually tested. So we do make sure that we only invest in ideas we all think are worthy. And out of those, because we don't have infinite amounts of resources, we invest in about half of those ideas. And out of those, half of the ideas that we test in the market live at 1, 2, sometimes 100%, I would say about 20% are immediately launched the way they were introduced to the market. And an additional 10% out of that 100% effectively are pivoted into something slightly different, but would still become its own feature and be very effective. So I think that funnel is quite successful. It does mean that 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 ideas just don't work, but at least we have the insights. And maybe there's no immediate results, but then down the line, there could be another learning or another feature developed from that. Thank you. I'll pause right there. I'd love to get your second question.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because it's not only the 30% realization, it's also the 70% of learning that is going to improve the chances. So that's beautiful, and that's not always what we are seeing. But my second question, so I understand that you're working in organizations that are really thriving on being innovative. Now, Roche is an organization where you have a very a big R&D engine that is really very effective and efficient in bringing those products to a pipeline that we need them to bring to the market. However, if we look at commercial innovation, like solutions for patients, it's all beyond that treatment. What we are seeing is that, given the fact that we are a decentralized commercial organization, where each country is having a huge empowerment in terms of P&L, decision-making, etc., what you see happening is all those beautiful, innovative projects, all done with their own identity in their own way, but very few really going to a point where they drive revenues? I hardly know one. At this stage, I don't think I could mention two really initiatives that went there. So the question that I'm having is, if you look at that with your experience, what would you say that are the key elements that we need to get in place to make this work? What would be the 2 or 3 things where you say, guys, without that, forget it, it's never going to work?
So I would say off the bat, I would set up a centralized go-to-market or internationalization or innovation team, or those 3 terms somehow combined. And that's what effectively Google and LinkedIn and many other tech companies here in Silicon Valley do. They have a GTM or go-to-market team. And that is oftentimes centralized. But again, it follows that pod structure where you have the go-to-market team as the pod leader, but then you have all these pod members that are also 20% part of the go-to-market project. And that team is really responsible for going after those decision makers and innovation leaders in those geos that you just described, to learn from them. Okay, why is this successful in your country? Then talk to the other pod members in other countries, explain the idea to them, get their insights, understand how could we replicate this innovative success in another country, and what is needed from a resourcing perspective so that we don't burn people out. And that go-to-market centralization team is very effective. It's so effective, in fact, that the sort of go-to-market teams at Google and LinkedIn, specifically for new innovative projects, that's where everybody wants to work, because it's a really exciting team to be in. So we get high quality people, a lot of talent from our London office, from our Singapore office, to say, hey, I worked with the go-to-market team, I've worked with business development and product, I've worked with this like pod structure. That's what I want. That's where I want to be. So, they become hyper-focused in one of these or several innovative projects, and then effectively apply for a formal position on the team in the central location, which for us would be either San Francisco or Sunnyvale, sometimes New York, and continue to work on that. And the people that excel in that role are ex-consultants, corp dev, business development, not sales, but like true business development, building completely new business units, people that are very strategic and understand the complexities of the internal organization. So these are typically people that have been with the company already for at least 2, 3, 4 years. Another part that I would add, we have chief of staffs for each of our bigger business organizations. So product, business development, we have our own chief of staff. The chief of staff role somehow also fuels the go-to-market decision making, because they also have a really good understanding, first and foremost, of what their own team is doing, because all of the KPIs, all of the projects within those teams funnel up to the chief of staff of that department. And that chief of staff then talks to the chief of staff above in that function. So from business development to product to our CEO. And that's how we set our quarterly goals or KPIs or OKRs. And as part of that, the knowledge that the chief of staff have is really important. So they work very closely with that go-to-market team to make sure that we focus on the right innovation and scale it to the geos where we think it's of interest. We, first and foremost, we have a really good data science team, and they're very difficult to find. So we do really support those teams a ton, and they're typically stretched. They're great to work with. The challenging part with any data science team for impact is they want to make sure it's statistically significant data, and sometimes it's just not out there. So you do want to also act like an owner and help them with that decision making, or take their data and extrapolate it to a point where you feel comfortable enough to make the right decisions. So I just want to highlight that as one of the key points of success, where sometimes you just don't have exactly the data you need. And then to answer your question, we have a very complex spreadsheet with all of the projects we're working on. And then we have the key metrics, daily active users, weekly active users, sessions, and ultimately revenue across our 4 business units. And then for each of these projects, we have the historical impact and then the forecasted impact based on formulas. For example, we currently have 750 member profiles. X percentage are active members, daily, weekly. How does that translate to all of the other metrics and revenue? And that I love looking at that spreadsheet because you can color code it and immediately get a really accurate overview and read on these are the top 10, 20 projects that are driving the majority of the company's growth from an engagement perspective. So looking back at those other vision and value frameworks and making sure we have the cultural values right and overlap on those. These are where we should prioritize. And to make it even more tangible, that's one of the reasons when I joined LinkedIn over 2 years ago, received the funding for the mobile growth project, because we were only doing about 5% of the company's growth. Now it's 60, 70% of the company's growth because of that spreadsheet, because we worked with data science and business operations to help build the formulas around the impact. And I think that is my key learning at joining any company or any go-to-market team or any innovative process. Start with, what is the impact? What are the goals the company cares about that we can move? And then be hyper focused on working with your data science, finance, biz ops teams. Help me build a formula to understand how we can calculate that forecasted impact, because that's effectively what, at least at LinkedIn, gets the resources to actually go ahead and the approval to build it out. We do it 2 ways. We look at starting a new quarter. What do we believe are the numbers at the end of the quarter? And let's work towards those and make sure that the impact is based on from like a future projection. And then we have check-ins every week, which sounds really intense, but it's just super, it takes a few minutes to do a quick check-in. And then we have what we call a health scorecard for each of these programs in a slide deck that basically says from 3 perspectives: partnerships, impact, how is this valued by the customer or the partner when it's a third-party integration, for example, to see how we're tracking. And eventually you want to have all those quartiles fully green. But it allows you to have a quick snapshot of a program to understand where you only have half the pie filled, so only half of it is green. Oh, we need to focus on this part of this partnership, or we need to focus on that part of this specific feature. So the combination with the spreadsheet to have that slide deck where you can get a quick snapshot of where you are and what the highlights are for last quarter, what you're working on in terms of focusing on this quarter, is really important. You get a historical snapshot, a window into the future and what your goals are, which has been working really well for LinkedIn. It's product. To answer your question, it is product. It's under product. And with the pod model, you have someone from business development, someone from data science, someone from biz ops, finance, legal. You need your legal team member, both for internal reasons when it comes to complex partnerships like Apple, Google, but also for partnerships. And then second, how do you measure its success? So the success of the innovation team is, one, key learnings. What's going well, what's not going well, and how can we pivot? And then 2, it's going back to those key goals that LinkedIn is trying to move, which is DAOs, WOWs, sessions, and those cultural values as well. Like, how does it support equality? How does it support first line?
Thank you very much. I wish you a great day, a lot of success over there, and thanks from us all, Martijn. Thank you. Bye-bye.